Ukraine isn't losing, Russia isn't winning. Far from what should happen, tell us, what do you think is most likely to happen next?
I don't know, and I think Ian is right. We all need to be a little humble here. We are in unchartered territory. Firstly, because in the 21st century, violating someone's territorial integrity is unacceptable, should be unacceptable, was not something that most military planners were planning for. So I think this is in some sense a grey swan, because we knew it was coming, and it came. It came faster than we thought it would come. Now, having said that, I think there are three interesting perspectives that have been shared in this particular discussion. The first is on EU and its role going ahead. Can this be the moment when EU really becomes a political strategic security actor? Or as the conflict lingers on, will we see a reversal? And will we see back to the old ways? Will we see trade and transactionalism trumping any other value-based framework that EU today believes is fundamental to defend and fight for? I think that's one thing that we need to watch. The second, what about the other votes that were garnered in the first big UNGA vote, 140 odd votes that came? How many of them are going to feel the same a few months from now, 3 months, 6 months? Are we going to poll similar numbers, or are we going to begin to see those outside of the proverbial West really begin to get exasperated by a never-ending family feud? Because some are going to see this as a European problem and are going to begin to get on with their lives, as Kishore mentioned, and that's the third point. Most of Asia sees this decade as important for their transformation. And for us sitting in India as well, I mean, yes, we'll have to steady the boat. We are being buffeted by inflation and challenges around some commodities and energy supplies. But I think there is also an opportunity in this crisis. And I can think of a few. The first, of course, is, can we right-size some of our relationships? This is the moment to reflect. Can we I'm talking about dependencies, all sorts of dependencies on Russia, on the West, on some other important contributors to our political economy. And I think that right sizing of relationships is one thing. And you mentioned China, but I'm sure most countries are being faced with a few questions that they need to respond to today. And certainly India is going to be engaging with that, or should be engaging with that, in terms of resetting its relationships. That's first. The second, of course, is the economic question. And here I think there is a positive side to it. We are seeing growth and momentum, and we're beginning to see many folks unlock their economic potential in the fourth industrial revolution. But we are also seeing that what was the basis, the undergirding of the fourth industrial revolution may actually be a political arena. For example, technology. Technology is not apolitical. When Uncle Sam decides that we need to cancel Russia, technology companies cancel Russia. And so how safe is the fundamental assumption that our growth based on international platforms is sanguine? And I think that's the second question. And final question that I really want to leave here is, what does it do to the world's approach to China going ahead? Now, is a value-based war only applicable in Europe, or is that a global?
So let me build on that and ask Ian Bremmer whether the war in Ukraine and the impact on Russia increases, in your view, the probability of China going to war on Taiwan, or does it decrease the probability, and why?
Well, I would say that it decreases the possibility, except that I thought the possibility was very, very low before Russia invaded Ukraine. So it's about the same. Why is that? Well, unlike Russia, which is a country that has been in decline, that viewed the Soviet collapse as a humiliation, as a geopolitical debacle, China is not. You've heard this in the panel. China's a country that feels like its future is ahead of it, and it is. And so as a consequence, they have the ability to be strategically patient. Furthermore, this is a tough year for China, not just because of Xi Jinping's third term that needs to be gone through smoothly, but also because the economy is going very badly. Now that they have, this big challenge with Russia, you've heard all of that before. Taiwan is the absolute critical semiconductor producer in the world for China and for others. They're not going to risk that suddenly. Furthermore, if they've learned any lesson from the course of the last 3 months, it's that the West is prepared to respond collectively when there is a crisis, when there is a true challenge. Not 2008 in Georgia, which was marginal. Not 2014 in Ukraine, which was at the margins. But, the Chinese frequently learn from the mistakes of the Russians. When Gorbachev decided to engage in political and economic reform simultaneously, they said, that was a really bad idea. Let's not do that again. And indeed, they haven't. Full throttle on economic reforms, no political reform whatsoever, no decentralization. I see exactly that going forward right now. Putin thinking that he has an easy way forward to grab Ukraine and no one's going to respond. You think the Chinese are going to say, let's roll the dice a second time on that one, or they're going to let Putin flail around a bit? I would make a strong bet on the latter.
But that is assuming that there's a rational mind and a rational decision. The reason I say it, for example, if you look at some of the policy choices, just over the past few weeks, the continuing with the zero COVID idea that you can somehow lock the pandemic away, which isn't very clearly the case. And some of Putin's policy choices also, at least outside Moscow, have seemed rather irrational. And so does zero COVID seem at this moment. So is Xi Jinping going to act in a completely rational, strategic way?
Look, on an Indian show, I understand that presuming rationality for the Chinese leadership is not necessarily a common perspective. But to go farther than that, I would say that over the course of the last 3 years, the Chinese government thought, understandably, that their zero COVID policy was working. They were the one economy in the world in the G20 that actually grew in 2020. Furthermore, they were in nightclubs, and their businesses, supply chain was working back when the Europeans, the Americans, the Indians were locking down or couldn't, right? And over the last 2 years, what do they see? 1 million dead in the United States, 1 million dead in Europe, thousands in China. I think that Xi Jinping believes that the Americans and the Europeans have been irresponsible libertines that don't care about their old and their sick. And the Chinese believe that they do. And to say that the Chinese government is irrational because they are willing to take significant economic pain and they're willing to actually throw away some individual liberties to ensure that 1 million don't die, I think that that's a fairly nationalist perspective.
Alexander Stubb, you make this point yesterday in your panel at the World Economic Forum where you said, don't assume that Vladimir Putin is an irrational actor. From a Russian point of view, a lot of what he's doing is the perfectly logical thing to do. Can you try and explain, because looked at from an Indian perspective, some of what Vladimir Putin's been doing looks completely irrational?
Yeah, and probably from a Western perspective as well. But I think we need to look a little bit deeper into Russian history and understand that there was a period of unrest before the 1600s. And that's when the Romanovs came in and stabilized the situation. And the Russian leader has always been supreme, either with God-given rights or class-given rights. And the starting point is that the Russian leader tries to unify Russia. And that is his rationality. He wants to see a historic Russia with one language, one religion, and one leader. And that is what his basis is. He also wants to cement his own legacy. He sees himself as Stalin or Peter the Great. This is his starting point. That's why, for us, it doesn't seem rational, because we ask the question, why is he doing that? And why is he mixing tactics and strategy and making these huge mistakes? But he is in this sort of historical power nostalgia frenzy and can't get out of it. That's why, from his perspective, he's doing the rational thing. Just because we don't think he's rational doesn't mean that he isn't.